Welcome to the Auditor Estate Uniform Accounting Network screencast for appropriation budgets in UAN. In this screencast, we will cover how to add, reallocate, supplement, and display appropriation budgets. Appropriation budgets can be added, reallocated, or supplemented for all the active funds and appropriation accounts. If a fund or appropriation account does not appear in your appropriation budget, refer to the screencast for funds and appropriation accounts to add them to your budget. We recommend that you first enter your revenue budget before entering your permanent appropriations. This will ensure that your appropriations don't exceed your resources available for appropriation. You can create temporary and permanent appropriations. Temporary appropriations are budgeted for the first quarter of the year to provide appropriations for your entity while budgetary or other issues are worked out for the permanent budget. The permanent budget is going to be your official budget for the year. Also, when creating appropriation budgets, remember that you can only enter an appropriation budget once per fund. If you need to modify your permanent appropriations, you will need to record a supplemental appropriation or reallocate your budget. To navigate to the appropriation budgets maintenance area, you want to select the accounting module, the maintenance menu option, and then the appropriation budgets function. The appropriation budgets area will open to the right, listing all active appropriation budgets currently used by UAN. The actions available in this area are add, reallocate, supplemental, and display. The close button just closes the appropriation budgets maintenance area. To add your appropriation, we're going to click the Add button. You can either select temporary appropriations or permanent appropriations. We're going to do permanent appropriations. As you can see on the right side, we've added our temporary appropriations for the year for all of our funds. As soon as I select permanent, we're going to get our system message that says, "Please note, permanent appropriations can be entered only once per fund. All future adjustments must be made by reallocations or supplementals. Refer to the resources available for appropriation report and accounting, reports and statements, budgetary reports." We're going to say OK to the message. Now the Add Appropriation Budget form will open, displaying the current options on the screen. We've got the Fund drop down, the Import Current Temps button, the Account Code grid, the Account Name grid, the Current Year Final Appropriation grid, the Unencumbered Balance grid, the Permanent Original Full Year column, the Revised Current Year Final Appropriation grid, the Revised Unencumbered Balance grid, the Effective Date field, the Save button, and the Close button. So to add our appropriation budgets for a fund, first thing we're going to do is select the Fund drop-down. So once we select the Fund drop-down, we're going to have a list of all the suggested funds. If the fund you're looking for is missing, you will need to close the form and add the fund. See the Funds Maintenance screencast for details. We're creating our permanent appropriation budget, and our temporary appropriation budget for all these funds already exist. I'm going to go ahead and just select the general fund. We have our Import Current Temps button. If you click the Import Current Temps, it's going to load the information from the temporary appropriations into the permanent original column of the permanent budget. Typically, all of your temporary appropriations for each appropriation account in a fund are not going to be the same amount of your final appropriation budget. You can still import the current temps for the accounts and make changes to the respective accounts that have differences between temporary and permanent budgeted amounts. I'm going to go ahead and click the Import Current Temps button just to show you. As you can see, all our temporaries have rolled over into permanent, and if we needed to make any changes, we can just select the appropriation account in the permanent original full year column and make a change. You can do that for any of the appropriation accounts. To enter the budget information, we're just going to enter them in the column permanent, original, full year. I've already imported the current temps, so we already have our temporary appropriations imported. All these budget amounts are optional, but you're going to have to enter a positive amount into at least one appropriation account budget. Remember, you don't want to include any prior year encumbrances when entering current year appropriations. Resources available for appropriation is already reduced by carryover encumbrances. If an appropriation account is not available for you, then you'll need to add the appropriation account and appropriation accounts maintenance. If an appropriation account is grayed out, then it has been deactivated. You can always reactivate the account in appropriation account maintenance as well. Remember that all budget revisions typically require the approval of your governing board prior to the revisions being recorded in UAN. Now that we've entered in our budget amounts, we're going to enter in our budget's effective date. You can either just type in the date, which is typically April 1st, or you can select it from the drop-down. Either option will work. You want to review your work and make sure everything's accurate before you save. If you click the close button before you save your work, you're going to get a system message that prompts you to save the changes. You can click yes to save and close the form, no to close the form without saving, or cancel to continue working on the budget. I'm going to go ahead and cancel. When we save the appropriation budgets, UAN will do one of three things. 1. If you have enough money available between your January 1st unencumbered cash balance and any revenue budget amounts, and you're creating a temporary appropriation budget, a message will appear in the lower left-hand part of the screen stating the temporary appropriation budget has been saved. Now, we'd already done that in this screencast. We're doing our permanent appropriations, so I can't really simulate that at this time. Our second option, if we have money available between your January 1st unencumbered cash balance and any revenue budget amounts, and you're creating a permanent appropriation, UAN will present you with a form notifying that the permanent appropriation you have entered for your fund will be marked as its original appropriation, and the budget you have entered will be marked as its original appropriation budget. Information about the total in the fund's revenue budget will also be displayed. Funds without revenue budgets will display a total of 0. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. That way you can see the form. As you can see, there's our original revenue budget and our original appropriations. Once I click OK, we've saved our appropriation budgets for the general fund. The third option that may appear, and we can't really simulate this would be an error, but if you have insufficient monies between your January 1st unencumbered cash balance and any revenue budgets, UAN will present you with a message stating that you have insufficient funds available for this transaction and will prevent you from posting the appropriation budget. Once you click OK to that message, you can make corrections on the current appropriation budget. Once you're done, you can click the Close button, and then you have added your permanent appropriation budget. Now that we've added our permanent appropriations for the general fund, we'll show you how to reallocate funds. A reallocation is used when you want to move unencumbered appropriations between account codes within a single fund. The reallocate amount must leave no net change to the budget amount and cannot reduce any budget's items total to less than 0. No omitted certificate of estimated resources is required because you're just moving budgeted funds from one appropriation account to another within the same fund, resulting in no net change to the appropriation budget as a whole. However, you typically need approval from your board to reallocate appropriations. Of course, this all just depends on your legal level of control. Don't confuse intra-fund transfers of funds from one appropriation account to another within the same fund with inter-fund transfers, which results in transfers of funds from one fund to another fund. If you need to complete an inter-fund transfer, see the inter-fund transfers screencast. In order to enter a reallocation, we're just going to select the fund that need appropriations reallocated and click the Reallocate button. So I'll choose the General Fund and click Reallocate. This will open the Reallocate Appropriation Budget form with your existing budget information. Next, we can enter the amounts of changes to budgeted items in the intra-fund column. We can put a negative sign in front of budgeted funds you're moving appropriations from, and a positive amount for the budgeted funds you're moving to. Remember, the positive and negative amounts for all reallocated funds must result in a net zero change for appropriations as a whole. I'll just go ahead and we're going to say we're moving $1,000 from our salaries trustees, and we're moving it to our salary township. Notice it's the same amount, positive and negative. This should be allowable as a reallocation. Now that we've entered in our reallocation, we can edit the date. It's here in our effective date field. Again, you can just type the date in, or you can select it from the drop-down. Note that UAN has several rules for what constitutes a valid date for this menu, which it will enforce. For example, UAN will not allow you to post a reallocation date before the original appropriation because reallocations of appropriations are typically approved by your board. It's also advised that you use the date that the reallocation was approved. So I'll just give you an example. If you try to do a reallocation on March 1st, for example, and save, you'll see that you get the red exclamation mark and that the date cannot be before the date of the original appropriation, which was April 1st. We're going to say we're looking at our minutes now, and this reallocation was approved by the board on April 12th, so we're going to give it an April 12th effective date. We also have some optional fields available on this screen. You can enter in information to the optional resolution and purpose fields, so again, you would look at your minutes to see when that was approved, and you could put the resolution number. Also in the purpose field, which is optional, you can just add notes regarding the reasons for the allocation. If you selected multiple funds to add reallocation to, you may scroll between them using the navigation arrows at the bottom left of the form. You can save your work before switching forms. Before you save and close, you want to review your work. If everything's accurate, click the Save button or the Close button. If you click the Close button again without saving your work, UAN will prompt you and give you the message that you want to save changes. You can click Yes to close the form, No to close the form without saving, or Cancel to continue working on the account. If you saved your work, the form's just going to close. I'm going to go ahead and cancel here. I'm going to click the Save button. As you can see, when I click Save, UAN has posted a message in the lower left-hand part of the form stating that the intra-fund appropriation for the selected fund number has been saved. If you're entering reallocations for multiple budgets, you'll be moved to the next budget in the series after saving. Repeat these steps for each reallocation until all reallocations are complete. I'll go ahead and close the reallocation form. Now we'll show you how to add a supplemental budget. Supplemental budgets are for two purposes. First, they're used to make any corrections made to your permanent original appropriations. When correcting a mistake, you'll mark it as a correction by clicking the correction box marked Apply as Correction. You only select the correction box if you made a mistake when entering the permanent appropriations the first time. The second purpose is to update your budget to reflect any changing circumstances that have had an impact on your appropriation budgets, such as a revenue shortfall or an unexpected cost, such as an emergency repair. If this is the case, an amended certificate of estimated resources should typically be requested from the county auditor. You would not check the Apply as Correction checkbox in this situation, as you want the supplemental appropriation to be reflected as a true supplemental appropriation in your reports. To do a supplemental, we're just going to select the fund receiving the supplemental appropriation in the Appropriation Budgets area. I'll just choose the General Fund, and we'll click the Supplemental button. Here's the Add Supplemental Appropriation Budget form. Here we can enter in the required budget revisions for each appropriation account into the supplemental column. All budget amount fields are optional, but you must change at least one budget number. You can put a negative sign in front of the amount if you want to decrease appropriations, and you want to enter a positive amount if you want to increase appropriations. Note that you cannot reduce a budget number below 0. Also, you must leave enough appropriations in any budget to handle any outstanding obligations, such as completing payments on existing purchase orders. I'll go ahead and just enter a positive supplemental appropriation in our salaries and trustees. As you can see, you can hit the Enter key down, or I can click on it with my mouse on whatever account needs a supplemental. Now that we've entered in our supplemental appropriation, we'll choose the date. Again, you can type in the date, or you can choose it from the calendar. I'll just choose April 12th. We also have our optional information as well. You'd want to look at your minutes and see when that supplemental appropriation was approved, and you can enter in the resolution number. Also, any notes that you want to make about the supplemental appropriation, you can enter in the purpose field. If you are just correcting the original budget, you would click the Apply as Correction checkbox. When you click the checkbox, you get our system message. Please note, when this box is checked, the supplemental budgets you have entered will be applied to the fund's original budgets and will not be reflected as supplemental budgets on the display form or on the budgetary reports. This should only be selected to correct transcription errors or to enter mistakenly omitted original budgets. It should not be selected when entering legitimate supplemental budgets or when simply correcting mistakes made in previous supplemental budget entries. And we'll say OK. Now, if you selected multiple budgets to add supplemental information to, you can scroll between them using the navigation arrows at the bottom left of the form. You may wish to save your work before switching forms. Before saving and closing, you'll want to review your work. If everything is accurate, click the Save button or the Close button. If you click the Close button without saving your work, UAM will prompt you with a message asking if you want to save the appropriation budget. Click Yes to save and close the form, No to close the form without saving, or Cancel to continue working on the supplemental. If you saved your work, the form will simply close. I'm going to go ahead and click Cancel on this, and when I click Save, you'll see that UAN posts a message in the lower left-hand part of the form stating that the supplemental appropriation budget for the selected fund number has been saved. If you're entering multiple supplemental budgets, you will be moved to the next supplemental budget in the series after saving. If you want to display your appropriation budget, you would just select the fund, so I'll choose the General Fund and click the Display button. The Display Appropriation Budget form will appear showing the first of the funds you selected for display. Display forms are read-only. If you selected multiple items to display, you may scroll between them using the navigation arrows at the bottom left of the form. Click the Close button when you're finished viewing the appropriation budget. In conclusion, the key points you will want to remember for managing appropriation budgets are: before you create an appropriation budget, you'll need to have an associated fund and appropriation account. We also strongly encourage you to create an associated revenue account and budget first if you have not done so. The supplemental appropriation function is used to correct permanent appropriations or to increase or decrease appropriations in the event of changing financial circumstances. Reallocation is used to move unencumbered appropriations within a fund. You cannot reallocate unencumbered appropriations between funds, and reallocations cannot change the net total of a fund. Use the supplemental function to change a fund's net total. Remember that budget revisions typically require the formal approval of your governing board prior to being recorded in UAN, and that the budgetary changes are generally required to be submitted to your county auditor. Thank you for using this screencast on the maintenance of appropriation budgets in UAN. For further information, you may contact the UAN support line at 800-833-8261 or by email at uan_support@auditor.state.oh.us.